again. Welcome to all 13,112, I think now, subscribers. And of course, first-time viewers and those of you watching on LinkedIn. We're live and back in the InfoSec Live studio for a focus today on my favorite topic of GRC. And how could we not throw in a little automation and, dare I say, a little bit of AI into the conversation as well. So today, I'm joined by two leaders from LockThreat GRC to explore how automation is reshaping governance, risk and compliance in what is now an AI-driven borderless economy. I'm going to be joined by Naeem Hussain, CEO of LockThreat, risk management and compliance expert, driving LockThreat's global mission to deliver cutting-edge GRC solutions, and Jeremy Powell, their CTO, a seasoned technology leader, steering innovation in secure, scalable enterprise platforms. And together, we're going to discuss AI governance, scaling GRC across multinational enterprises, and how automation can streamline compliance, cut errors, and keep organizations agile. As always, we want this to be as interactive as possible. So please bring your questions and let's join the conversation. Let's bring them on. Good afternoon, good evening.
Hello, hello.
Thank you so much, gents, for taking the time to come on and have a chat today. I've just noticed that I'm on the wrong side of the screen, so I'm just going to move. There we go. Naeem on the bit that says LockThreat. Seamless that. Thanks so much for coming on. I say GRC is my favorite subject because for those, some people watching will know my background. I had over 20 years in governance, oversight and control functions in a regulated industry. So sometimes in this industry, I feel a little bit out of my depth on the conversations. Today, I'm hoping that I can have an engaging and an insightful one with you both. Before we start digging into the topic though, can I just get you both to give us a little bit of background about what you've done before? And I'm going to kick off with you, Naeem, if that's okay.
Sure thing. First of all, Simon, thanks for having us. I really appreciate the opportunity. I started my journey as an engineer at companies like Verizon in the telecommunications space and then Siemens in the healthcare space. Specifically at Siemens, the mission was very close to my heart because it had to be precise. Otherwise, it's a matter of life and death. I had a very interesting story. When my daughter was born, the equipment that was being used was all Siemens equipment, stuff that me and my wife actually worked on. So that was a really cool thing to see the stuff that we were working on actually in action. Later, I worked at ING Direct and Capital One Bank, both highly regulated. And for the first time, I actually saw up close and personal how much time and energy teams have to spend to be in compliance, with regulations, internal compliance, especially with ING Direct, we had European compliance to deal with as well. And so as time went on, I had the opportunity to build a company called Cirrus Labs, scaled it globally. And as a business owner, now I have to deal with compliances all over the world, whether it's tax compliance in India, regulatory compliance in the Middle East, or here in the US and in Canada and other parts of the world. That was a good motivation for us to get started with LockThreat. And so we decided to launch LockThreat as a platform with one bold vision. Any framework, any industry, and any region in the world. So I'll turn it over to you, Jeremy.
Which is a challenge in itself, but we can move on. We can move on to that challenge of different regulation around the world in a sec. Jeremy, thanks, Naeem. Jeremy, tell me a bit about yourself and how you've ended up at LockThreat.
Yeah, absolutely. I exited a business back in November. It was actually an MSSP out of Texas, a managed security service provider that I worked with for about 3.5, 4 years. And I've been in the security space. Previous to that, I was a CISO at a public company, but I started my career 30 years ago as an engineer, hardcore infrastructure engineer. Just I still think in terms of the OSI model in my daily life. Layer 1 through layer 7. What's going to work? What's not? Is it plugged in? That type of thing. I started off in the heady days of the .com bubble. Working in startups and being very entrepreneurial in my career, working through large corporations as well. But I think where my passion for GRC and how I got eventually to LockThreat was I sat in a CISO chair at a public company for almost 5 years, and that was after an acquisition. And we built a program from the ground up, and it was a highly regulated environment, lots of really interesting data from a customer perspective, lots of interesting classifications layered on that data. And so we had to build a program of compliance around that. And one of the pain points that we always saw was just this, there was no single authority. There was no single way to drive automation across the entire platform. And with a portfolio of 35 applications, one of which driving over 100 million in revenue alone, it was like, if I'm going to have to do 4 or 5 certifications just on this one product and then put that across 35, plus we bought a new company every 6 months, it becomes a real challenge. And I think that's where my passion for this came from. And it's definitely was the right choice moving into LockThreat at the beginning of the year when I came over here. Just, I mean, funny story. I'll tell you this is that I had exited the last business and said to my wife and my family, I'm just going to go get on my mountain bike for a year. And you guys can fly out and see me. I'll be out in Moab, riding bikes and having fun and that kind of thing. And then somebody said, you need to go talk to this guy, Naeem, over in Alpharetta, just a few miles from my house. And I said, okay, I'll go over there. And then after a few conversations with him and his business partners, it was like, this is the next thing. This is absolutely the next thing. So
it's too good to be true.
It is.
Couple of things out of that. I just want to dig into quickly. You mentioned you've worked for big enterprises, and you've worked for startups. Which do you prefer, or should I say, are there bits of the different types of organizations that you prefer? I see you in the startup world again, and you've obviously been in there before. Talk to me about your preference between enterprise and startup, Jeremy.
So I think enterprises are enjoyable for a lot of different reasons, right? You have the scale, you have a lot of resources and things like that, and you have opportunities to tackle really interesting sort of structural problems. But my passion lies in a startup. I love the culture. I love the transparency, everybody moving in the same direction, and it's intoxicating. It truly is.
It's the different hats as well. I mean, I asked the question because I love the startup environment myself. And ironically, 5 years ago, I said to my wife that I'd never have a business again. So there's a certain amount of irony in that point, I think. But there we go. I can't sit around all day or ride my bike all day. I'll get a little bit bored. I think we all need a little bit more direction than that.
Right.
But, okay. Got some questions to dig into. I'm going to come back to you, Naeem, for the first one. How do you see AI and automation fundamentally reshaping governance, risk, and compliance in the next 3 to 5 years?
The simplest way I can put it is where I see AI today with respect to GRC is where cloud was in IT a decade ago.
Yeah.
I don't think it's a question of, if it's going to happen. It's a question of when. Yeah. Because the writing's on the wall, right? We are seeing today that the practitioners in the GRC world are stuck in the weeds, chasing spreadsheets, chasing evidence. It's a lot of effort, manual effort that goes into create judgments. And I think AI is going to take away a lot of those disparate sources of information and turn it into insights that can then lead to better, more informed judgment, right?
Do you think we're ever going to get away from the fact that we need a human to review the output and make the final decisions? Because that's what we're hearing a lot about in every industry at the moment. Everyone's worried about their jobs. I mean, I'd like to think of it in a slightly different way. I think AI can be great for all of our jobs as long as we understand it and we embrace it properly.
No, absolutely, right. So I think the why behind what we do is always human. Right. So you still need humans because the why behind any judgment that you're making, the ability for you to judge your risk tolerance, it's not just on a spreadsheet. I remember I was, at one of the banks I worked with in the past, and one of the analysts brought a bunch of spreadsheets and showed a bunch of changes to the variables and saying, hey, if we did this, the numbers turn into X and we make Y, right? And I remember one of the executives saying, I wish it was that easy. Because the numbers give you a story, but it's actually the humans behind it who have to make it happen. And so AI is going to provide us connected insights into large sets of data, which is very disparate. But you still need humans, GRC practitioners, to come up with the judgment and lead us to set direction. So I feel like AI is just going to tee up the information for you in a manner that is consumable.
I mean, I look back to 5+ years ago when I was every 6 months as a regulated entity under the FCA in the UK, you have to produce a Gabriel report to provide them the ins and outs of your business. And that used to take us probably 2 weeks, myself, an office manager, a couple of admins trying to pull all that data together. I mean, it'd now be 5 minutes.
Yep.
With AI.
Exactly.
That's where the real value is. Jeremy, I'm going to come over to you now because there's a lot of people in the community who might be watching. Dr. Jonathan Van Houten, we mentioned him briefly on the call before, I think. He always says it isn't AI, it's machine learning. So when we talk about AI in GRC, are we really talking about machine learning, natural language processing, or more mundane rule-based automation? Where's the real innovation happening?
So I think that there's always the underlying truth that those technologies are going to be with us for a very long time, right? But where I think the innovation is actually happening is around being able to have a contextually aware model. That seems to be where true innovation is happening, right? You have a model that's trained against a specific vertical or a specific set of instructions that is narrowly focused and will answer those questions or provide that level of automation based upon what it knows and not really anything else. Yes. One of the funny things that we talk about around, when we talk with our customers is that, our model is not going to answer about what the rock band from 1972 was. It doesn't know that, right? But what it's going to do is it's going to provide you expertise, around GRC, right? It's going to do what it's supposed to do. It's contextually aware. It's world aware.
Yeah. No, I'm reading, to go off on a context a little bit, I'm reading a book at the moment that's talking about quantum mechanics and consciousness. And one of the things the author of it is the guy who created the microprocessor, by the way, which is quite interesting. But he's saying we can never have a conscious AI. I'm not going to go into what he says in the book as to why, but for me, that's the bit. We're always going to have to be there to make those decisions. And we're trained on more than one thing, right? So we can take that objective kind of view with a humanity lens, I suppose. Okay, next question. Naeem, I'm going to ask you this one. Coming from a regulated background, regulators aren't always that fast to catch up with anything, never mind tech. So how do we build trust with regulators around AI-driven GRC responses and processes?
Like with everything else, Simon, it's all about dialogue and discipline.
Yeah.
So it's a lot of education on both sides, right? I never want to be presumptuous. The regulators that we're talking to and we're dealing with, they know the business. They know what they want to get done. We are here to provide the how to do it with technology, with AI, right?
Yeah.
So understanding their use cases and how they intend to go after their mission. For example, if you're in healthcare, they want the safety for the patients, right? That's kind of the core mission at the end of the day. So what can we do to help support that? I feel the key intent in working with the regulators is to understand their business and also share with them what we are learning as we are on our journey as well, right? So, everyone's learning about how AI works and what it can do for their businesses. Regulators also trying to figure this out. It's no different. And at the end of the day, there are people on both sides, right? So it's really about establishing that dialogue and that trust with the individuals in terms of what mission they are actually trying to go after and how our technology can serve them, how it can actually help them achieve their mission. As an example, one of the regulators we are working with, they were doing a couple of hundred assessments for the entire sector on a quarterly basis. Just 3 days ago, we sent out to our platform 2,700 assessments, altogether fully automated through our workflow engine. And it's working flawlessly. And so we have actually helped that regulator now get to better outcomes, which is driven towards their mission. So I see that as sort of a win, working with the regulators and helping them understand. Now we are coming up with newer ways to do things. We talked about NLP, and we're coming up with some really cool tech, which will really even simplify this further. For example, gathering evidence, doing manual evidence gathering and processing it. I think AI can really help there in both not only the collection part, but also adjudicating it and giving it a confidence score.
100%. Yeah.
Right. And that then a human has to apply a judgment and say, yeah, this is good. This is compliant. Let's move.
Yeah. And are the regulators receptive that you're dealing with at the moment?
Very much. So we are operating in the Middle East quite a bit, and there's a big push by many countries in the Middle East to be leaders in this AI economy. And so there's certainly something we see as the leaders of these nations actually driving towards getting to a better outcome using the technology to the fullest. We see that here in our customer base in the US as well. All the way from policy generation. When you have to deal with multiple frameworks, and it takes you months to go through a manual process to generate policies and controls that are in compliance with multiple frameworks, I think we can use AI in a manner that is truly supportive of cutting down that cycle time.
And that's the word, isn't it? Supportive. Yeah.
Yeah, it's really about really looking at the customer's mission and figuring out how we can serve them, right? So our mission is to actually create delightful experiences for GRC practitioners. So how do we do that, right? What kind of technology are we putting in front of them? How do we interact with them? How do we co-create with them? I think that's an opportunity.
Yeah, 100%. Jeremy, a couple of things. Arya's in the audience and she says hi. I don't know if you've noticed that in the chat. But yeah, I didn't know if you want to say hi back. And Prashant has asked a question. I don't know which of you, if either of you want to answer it. Will there ever be a closed loop AI system that can be trusted and trained to be reliable? Terrifying thought.
Yeah. Will there be? Probably.
Yeah.
I think that there's always the possibility of that. Is there a probability? Yeah, I think so. But again, it goes back to one of the questions you asked, Naeem, is that, you always want to have that human in the loop, right? That's sort of the core of what we're trying to achieve, because this technology is an enabler. It's to facilitate an outcome getting more accurate and faster. And so I think that, the adage that there's going to have to be a human in the loop, it still stands. Yeah.
Good. I want to go back to something you mentioned at the start, and it made me think about it because we're dealing with a customer at the moment who've got offices in about 6 different countries, which all have their own regulation. Talk to me about how AI can help companies like that, because it might actually lead into a referral for you as well. So that's asking the question.
Do you want me to take that, Debbie, or
yeah, please start and I'll riff on it. Sure
thing. So Simon, the way we all are seeing business evolve, and I think you said something very interesting in the beginning of this talk, right, which is a borderless economy. So multi-jurisdictional businesses are everywhere right now. Even if you're doing any sort of outsourcing, offshoring, when you look at supply chain and you're buying stuff from all over the world, regardless of where you end up building it and putting things together, you have to comply across the board. Think about the airline industry. We are working with some airlines and kind of going through this process, right? Passenger lists that are generated in Europe probably need to be there for GDPR reasons. And if you look at another country, let's say Saudi Arabia, they have their own privacy laws, right? So how data gets shared across borders and yet be compliant is a multi-jurisdictional problem. And this is where I think LockThreat really, from our technology perspective, and Jeremy can dive deeper into it, the ability for us to have multi-cloud, multi-tenant systems architecturally capable of handling this growing borderless economy and supporting businesses that are truly in multiple jurisdictions is probably one of the coolest things that we have built.
Yeah, and just to kind of double click on that a little bit, is that the flexibility around where you operate and how that data moves back and forth is a business rule. It's a compliance rule, right? And you have to maintain sovereignty on your customers' data. And we're very good at that from a technology standpoint. But one of the things I want to call out, though, is from a business standpoint, and this is critical, is that all of those frameworks, those regional ones, those global ones, the big 4 or 5 that everybody needs to have globally, all of those are not static things. Okay, no. They're ephemeral. And there's a business function related to that. And I think this is where LockThreat is definitely differentiated in that, is because we treat that as a business function, not necessarily as a technical function. And so it gives our customers a lot of flexibility. It gives us, the ability to put whatever data we want, whatever operations we want, and still maintain the sovereignty of our customers' data.
And Simon, just to add to that, right? I think we already have 200 plus frameworks in our system.
Wow.
So when you're looking at US specific frameworks, and I'm talking not only just about ISO and NIST and the other known one, we're talking about the ability to pull in regulations. We're working with a financial exchange company, currency exchange company out of the Middle East, and they required 4 or 5 federal laws to be implemented. So these are again oversight regulatory frameworks from a specific country that we incorporated within a couple of days, right? So that's the kind of flexibility that I think businesses expect from platforms of today. For me, technology is about simplicity. So you don't want to have, you don't want to end up having 20 different systems to run a business when it comes to compliance, and now you have data points that are scattered. I feel as a business person myself, business is already hard. So if the tools don't help you make good decisions quicker and enable you, then they're not really worth it. So we're trying to build a platform that truly can enable businesses.
Thank you both for that. You mentioned the aviation industry. I know over the last year there's been a lot of change and pressure on the aviation firms with regards to supply chain risk. I don't know if you've seen much around that.
We are seeing a lot of questions and demands across the industry, across multiple sectors, right? So aviation being one of them. So let's kind of share this thought and insight that I had in talking to some of our customers, right? A lot of our customers looking at, for example, the FAA, and they say, hey, the FAA has actually some of the best regulations, best policies, best frameworks available. We are trying to develop our own. How can we do our own thing, but still have the best of the best, right? And this is where I think AI, Simon, comes very handy, right? Imagine if you are a healthcare provider in Abu Dhabi, and you are supposed to comply with ADHICS, which is the framework in the UAE for information security for healthcare, right? But you're sending patients to the UK, or you're sending patients to the US. And now you've got to worry about privacy in the UK, you've got to worry about privacy in the US. By the way, in the US, you have to be compliant with HIPAA.
Yep.
Right?
And you've got state by state regulations as well, just to make it even more complex.
If you go to California, exactly. If you go to California, it's slightly different than other parts of the country, right? And now, on top of that, money is being exchanged, right? So you got to worry about PCI DSS. You got to worry about network security and all these other frameworks that have come into play. This is where the beauty of actually having a platform that can have multiple frameworks that address your business need. And then you put on the AI component as an enabler that brings together policies and controls that help you be compliant and help it be easy for you, right? You don't have to go through 8 months of grind to figure this out, right? That's what I feel. Our technology and what AI, I think, generally can do in the industry would be revolutionary.
Yeah,
I think so.
I would add to that, guys, is that you're talking about risk tolerance and reducing risk all the way across your organization, plus from your suppliers' perspective. I mean, when you go look at the landscape of GRC right now, and there's probably a third of the vendors out there that are just focused on third-party risk. And why is that? Well, because the industry, or no matter what vertical it is, that's where the pressure's coming from, okay? Because most of the large breaches, and you can go out there and look at this, most of the large breaches are not necessarily at an organization. They're 2 or 3 levels deep from a supplier perspective, or for third-party tooling, that kind of stuff. And we have to understand how that's going to impact risk for an organization, measure it properly so that they can understand what they're going to accept.
Yeah, so that's a really good point. I'm thinking Jaguar Land Rover at the moment. They got hit on Sunday. By the way, I have owned Land Rovers in the past, and for anyone thinking about buying them, they just go wrong after 3 years as soon as the warranty's gone. Just get that in there. But I read in the press today, they got hit on Sunday. They haven't produced one vehicle since. All of their plants are shut down.
Oh my! Wow.
And in the UK, which is, I think, where 70% of their vehicles are built, we issue new registration vehicles on the 1st of September and the 1st of March every year. So no one got their new cars either. So people are really starting to feel the impact from this. And it's another example of a company who's, spread all over the world and and subject to all different rules and regulations. I'm conscious we've only got 5 minutes left. I can't believe how quickly this has gone. I've got about 20 questions left and probably time for one. So what I'd like to do, because we haven't even dug in to talk about your platform and how it works. So I'm going to ask you one or two more questions, and then I'd love to invite you both back on in 4 weeks, 5 weeks time to actually give us a dive into the platform and show us what it's about, if that's okay.
Sure.
Excellent. So you mentioned it, I think, Jeremy, or it might have been you, Naeem. I have got 6 children and I'm 50, so I do forget things quite quickly. Mentioned the word platformization. And we went through something similar in financial services about 15 years ago. I had an independent advisory business and we used a single platform for everything towards the end. Do you see, is it just a buzzword, or do you actually think, or got all these companies tangled up in this tool sprawl everywhere? Do you think platformization combined with AI is the inevitable answer, or do you think some of these niche tools will survive? Whoever wants to answer that.
I think at the end of the day, it's going to be the ecosystem that will matter, and ecosystem will need a platform or platforms, right? And you're going to need the ability to have APIs and many new ways to connect to agentic tools and so on and on. You have to have the ability to connect with, for example, just in the cyberspace, to do continuous control monitoring. You have to be able to pull telemetry in. So I think all of these go hand in hand, Simon, right? So you need this very niche technology to solve a problem, but you still need a centralized platform that can gather this data from multiple sources and make it intelligent, make it
100%.
consumable for the end user, right? Otherwise, it's just data points that you have to grapple through.
Yeah,
Jeremy,
I completely agree.
Yeah, I mean, remember back to the early or mid 2000s with Eric S. Raymond and the statements about the cathedral or the bazaar, right? And you can have a monolithic cathedral that's closed and things like that, but when it comes to being able to be flexible to deliver outcomes for a customer, because they have partners too, you have to be able to work with all these people. So it's that ecosystem that's going to be important, and your ability to interface with those. Yeah,
I'm so glad you said that, because one of the things that shocked me the most, well, a few things shocked me when I joined the industry. One was people's obsession on keep buying more and more tools for no reason, which seems to be something that companies do, or maybe it's because vendors are so good at selling tools. I don't know, but it just seems like a bit of a muddle, the industry, and we're really poor at sharing information between vendors, is what I've seen since I've been in it.
Simon, the reality of any business that we are dealing with, right, is that there are different business functions, right? All the way from finance to HR, marketing, supply chain management, IT.
Yeah.
Each of them have tools that are specialized for serving a purpose in that particular department or an organization to serve a business function. But compliance doesn't live in silos, right? So you still need the ability to connect the dots across the board.
Yeah.
Right. And that's what I think platforms come into play. With the right integration strategy, the right ability to touch into multiple business units or multiple business functions, talk to the different tools, being able to pull relevant data, tie it back to your controls. And just like Jeremy said, at the end of the day, it's really looking at risk. You have to be able to pull the data across the board so that you have a good snapshot of where you are at. And really, from a LockThreat perspective, we are trying to get to the point where this data and this information is as real time as possible. So you're not looking at this in the rearview mirror where everything is perfect and you found something out. It's real pushing the boundary on the AI side. And this is where I think machine learning comes into play, is to get into predictive analytics, predictive risk management.
No, I completely agree. I think when I first started hosting a show called the CISO Experience back in 2022, one of the common comments that would come up from the security leaders is that they hated the terminology single pane of glass. And I get why, vendors have overused it. And I've got to be honest, I agree a little bit. However, with AI and automation and all the API hooks that we've got everywhere now, I honestly think it's a realistically achievable thing. But like you said, you're always going to have your individual tools for individual things. But if we can consolidate all that telemetry and bring it all together on one platform, that will be that single pane of glass. And Naeem, you said about the trying to make it like an instant snapshot of where you are. That's been the problem with compliance for a long time, is that we've been looking at historic data for everything and not being in today's world. So we're actually out of time. thank you so much for taking the time to come on. Any wise words before I wrap things up? Jeremy, any wise words to anyone listening? It doesn't have to be cyber related. It can be anything.
I don't know. Is it dad advice time or something like that? Maybe I'll bring it back. I'll bring it back to cyber. It's never about fear, uncertainty, and doubt. It's always about what the risk tolerance is.
Love that.
Don't try to build your program on fear. Build it on
I'll tell you one thing that I haven't, a terminology that I use an awful lot in financial services. We talked about risk tolerance a lot, but we also talked about capacity for loss a lot. And I don't hear that terminology used in this industry. I'm going to try and start it becoming more fashionable. We'll see how that goes. But thank you, Jeremy. Naeem, any words of wisdom before we go?
All I can say is ignoring AI, specifically when it comes to GRC in today's world, is like ignoring the internet in 1995.
Yeah.
Yes.
So I think it's not a question of whether it will transform work. It will, absolutely. And the speed of adoption is what I think businesses are trying to figure out. So if I had to share an insight, I would say just figure out a way to really learn right now, because there's so much going on. And
100%.
it's really about learning, keeping a very open growth mindset, absorb everything you can. So.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you so much, guys. Thank you. I look forward to having you back on for a proper deep dive. I have got a little QR code here somewhere. Where is it? If anyone wants to check you guys out and be brave enough to scan a QR code in cybersecurity, there's a QR code at the top of the screen that will take you through. I promise, because I've done it myself, direct to their website. If not, please connect with Naeem and Jeremy on LinkedIn. Check out the website, and I'll have the guys back on in 4 or 5 weeks' time for a deep dive into the platform. So I hope everyone has found that useful. Naeem, Jeremy, thank you so much. I'm off to have my tea, as they say here in the UK, and I'll see you both soon. Take care.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks, guys.
Bye.
Bye.